The night was colder than death on the frozen world. In the middle of the storm, an alien widow stood outside the colony gates. Her husband was gone. Her people had turned their backs on her. The guards pushed her away, saying she had no place. Inside, one by one, the doors closed. No one cared if she froze to death. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking, her breath turning to ice in the air. Every step grew weaker, every knock unanswered. She was about to fall into the snow forever when one door slowly opened. A human stood there. His eyes met hers in silence, and then, in a whisper that cut through the storm, he said only 2 words, "Come in." The night was bitter and endless on the frozen planet. The wind howled through the empty streets of the colony, carrying sharp flakes of ice that cut against the skin. Inside the gates, warm lights glowed from small houses, each door locked, tight against the storm. But outside those gates, an alien widow stood alone in the cold. Her thin cloak pulled tightly around her trembling body. Her breath rose like smoke, fading into the darkness. She had once lived in the colony with her husband, working beside him in the frozen mines. He had been strong, steady, and respected. But when the accident happened and the ice claimed his life, everything changed. Without him, she was no longer welcome. Whispers began, cruel voices saying she was a burden, a mouth too many to feed. Soon the whispers became orders. The leaders told her she could no longer stay. That night, they pushed her outside the gates, leaving her to face the storm alone. That she knocked on the first door she could find, her frozen fingers tapping weakly. A shadow moved inside, but no one opened. "Go away," a voice hissed from behind the wall. She stumbled to the next door, her teeth chattering as she knocked again. Another voice answered, sharp and cold, "We cannot help you. Leave." One by one, the houses refused her. One by one, the lights went dark. Her steps grew slower. The snow reached her knees. Her body felt heavy, her heart beating weakly against her chest. She thought of her husband and how warm his hands used to be. She thought of the home they shared, now gone. She whispered his name into the wind, but only the storm answered. The colony wall loomed behind her, tall and uncaring. Beyond it, life went on. Inside, families sat by fires, their children laughing, their tables full of food. But here, beyond the gate, there was nothing but silence, snow, and the endless cold. She knew she would not survive the night. Her vision blurred. Her knees gave out, and she sank into the snow, her cloak falling open. She tried to rise again, but her legs refused to move. The cold was pulling her down deeper and deeper, as if the ice itself wanted to claim her. For a moment, she almost let it. Maybe it was easier to close her eyes and fade away. But then, through the storm, she saw a faint light. It was small, distant, and almost hidden, but it was there. A single house stood at the edge of the colony, its window glowing dimly against the dark. Gathering the last of her strength, she forced herself to rise. Each step toward the light felt like lifting stones, but she kept moving. At last, she reached the door. She raised her hand, weak and shaking, and knocked. There was no answer. She tried again, her fist barely strong enough to make a sound. Still nothing. Her body trembled. She pressed her forehead to the cold wood, her eyes closing. This was the end. But then, the sound of a lock turned. The door creaked slowly open. Warm air brushed against her frozen face, and she lifted her eyes. A human man stood in the doorway, his figure tall and silent. His eyes studied her for a moment, as if deciding what she was. He could have closed the door like all the others. He could have turned away, but instead, his gaze softened. The alien widow opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Only the sound of her ragged breath. The storm roared around them, demanding she be left outside. Yet the man did not move. His voice broke the silence, calm and steady. Only 2 words carried on the wind. "Come in." The widow blinked, not sure if she had heard correctly. But the man stepped aside, the glow of firelight spilling into the night. His hand lifted slightly, not forcing, only welcoming. For the first time since her husband's death, warmth touched her heart. She crossed the threshold, her legs nearly giving way. The door closed behind her, shutting out the storm. Inside, the air was rich with heat. the fire crackling in a small hearth. The human set a blanket over her shoulders, his movements careful and without judgment. She sank into the chair he pulled close to the fire, her body shivering as the warmth began to return. For a long while, neither spoke. Only the sound of the storm outside and the fire within filled the silence. She looked at him, wondering why. He had opened the door when no one else had. He looked back, his face calm, but his eyes holding questions of their own. The night outside was still endless, the storm still wild. But for the first time in a long time, the alien widow felt she was not completely alone. And as she sat in the warmth of a stranger's kindness, a quiet thought touched her mind. Perhaps the cold had not won yet. The storm outside kept roaring, but inside the small house there was silence and warmth. The alien widow sat close to the fire, wrapped in the heavy blanket. Her body still shook from the cold, but slowly the feeling returned to her fingers. She watched the flames carefully, almost afraid that if she looked away, everything would vanish and she would wake again in the snow. The human moved quietly round the room. His home was simple: wooden walls, shelves with tools, a table with only one chair. It was clear he lived alone. He placed a small bowl of soup in front of her. The steam curled into the air, filling the room with a gentle smell. She stared at it for a moment, then lifted the spoon with shaking hands. The warmth spread through her body with each sip, and her eyes began to soften. He did not rush her. He simply sat across the table, watching with calm patience. After a while, he asked, "Why were you outside?" His voice was not sharp like the others she had heard at the colony gates. It was steady, curious, almost kind. She lowered her eyes, her fingers tightening around the bowl. "They said I did not belong anymore. My husband, he worked in the mines. When he was gone, they turned me away." Her voice cracked as she spoke, each word heavy with pain. The man nodded slowly, as if he already understood. He had seen the colony's ways before. They accepted those who were strong and useful. But anyone who became weak, anyone different, was quickly forgotten. "You could have walked away," she whispered. "You could have closed the door like the others. Why didn't you?" The human leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "Because you knocked, because you needed help." She blinked, surprised by the simplicity of his answer. No one had ever said something so plain, so human. For a long moment, she stayed silent, her mind trying to believe that such kindness could exist. As the night stretched on, the firelight flickered softly across the walls. The widow's shivering slowed, and her eyes grew heavy. The man placed another blanket over her shoulders. "Rest," he said gently. "You are safe here." But even as her eyes closed, shadows of fear still haunted her thoughts. The faces of the colonists, the whispers behind closed doors, the sharp eyes that had followed her since her husband's death, none of that had vanished. She knew the colony would not forget where she had gone. The human, too, sat in silence, his thoughts heavy. He had opened his door out of instinct, but now he wondered what trouble might follow. He had seen the way the colony treated those who stepped out of line. Tomorrow, questions would rise. Someone might come looking. He glanced at the sleeping figure by the fire and realized there was something about her that unsettled him, not fear, but mystery. There was more to her story than she had told. Later in the night, a soft sound stirred him awake. It was not the storm outside, nor the fire inside. It was a whisper. He turned his head and saw her shifting in her sleep, her lips moving quietly, as if speaking in another language. Her skin glowed faintly, a soft light pulsing under the surface like the shimmer of hidden stars. The human froze. He had never seen anything like it. For a moment, the entire room felt strange, as though the air itself carried her hidden secret. The glow faded as quickly as it came, and she settled back into silence. He did not wake her. He did not ask questions, but he sat by the fire, his mind racing. Perhaps the colony had not cast her out only because she was alone. Perhaps they feared her for another reason. When morning came, the storm eased, though the snow lay heavy across the colony streets. The man stepped outside briefly to gather wood. From the corner of his eye, he noticed figures in the distance. Guards. They were walking slowly, scanning the homes, their breath curling in the cold air. He felt a weight press on his chest. They were searching for her. Inside, the alien widow sat by the fire, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She seemed to sense the same danger without a word being spoken. When the man returned, she looked at him with wide, worried eyes. "They will come," she whispered. "They will not stop until they find me." Her voice trembled, but her eyes held something else, an old knowledge, a secret too heavy for her to carry alone. The human understood then that his choice last night was not just about kindness, it was about standing against the colony itself. The storm outside had ended, but a new storm was beginning to rise inside the walls of the colony. And he knew, deep in his heart, that his simple words come and had already changed both their lives forever. The morning light was pale and weak on the frozen horizon, yet the air inside the small house still carried the warmth of fire. The alien widow sat quietly, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders, though her thoughts felt colder than the storm. She had survived. She could not escape the memory of the guards moving in the distance, their eyes searching, their boots breaking the snow. She knew they would not rest until they discovered where she had gone. The human watched her from across the room. He had seen her fear, but he had also seen something else, something she had not spoken of. In the quiet hours of the night, when the storm had been at its loudest, her body had glowed with a strange, soft light. It was faint, yet unmistakable. He had never seen anything like it, and he had lived on this frozen world his whole life. He wanted to ask her about it, but the words stuck in his throat. He could sense that this secret was heavy, and that once it was spoken aloud, nothing would be the same. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. Finally, when the silence became too sharp, he said gently, "Last night, while you slept, something happened. Your skin, it glowed." Her head snapped up, fear flashed in her eyes, so sharp, it made the firelight look dim. She shook her head, clutching the blanket tighter. "You should not have seen that," she whispered. He leaned forward slightly. "What was it?" For a long moment, she did not answer. The flames crackled softly, filling the space between them. At last, her voice came, quiet and heavy with pain. "It is why they sent me away. Not because I was weak, not because I was alone, but because of what I carry inside me." The human frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then slowly unwrapped the blanket from her arm. In the glow of the fire, faint markings shimmered beneath her skin, like threads of silver running through her veins. They pulsed lightly, as if alive, then faded again into nothing. "I was born with it," she explained. "My husband knew, but he kept my secret. He said the colony would never understand, that they would fear me, and he was right. When he was gone, I could not hide it anymore. They saw what I was, and they cast me out." The human sat back, the weight of her words sinking deep. He understood the colony's fear. Anything unknown was treated as danger. Yet as he looked at her, shivering by the fire, he did not see danger. He saw someone who had lost everything, someone who had been abandoned when she needed others most. Still, he wondered, what does it mean, those markings, that light? She lowered her gaze. "It is not only light, it is knowledge. My people, long ago, were touched by something greater. A memory passed through blood. I carry it. I hear it sometimes in my dreams, whispers of things not meant to be spoken. If the colony knew the full truth, they would not only fear me, they would try to use me." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. The human felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold outside. He realized now that helping her was more than an act of kindness. It was a step into something far larger, something that might place both of them against the colony itself. Before he could answer, a faint sound reached them, the crunch of boots on snow. The widow's eyes widened. She rushed to the window, pulling the curtain back just a finger's width. Two guards stood at the edge of the path, speaking in low voices. One of them pointed toward the row of houses, his breath fogging in the cold air. "They are searching already," she whispered. Her hand trembled as she let the curtain fall back into place. "If they find me here, you will pay the price." The human rose slowly, his jaw tight. "Then they must not find you." She looked at him, confusion mixing with fear. "You would hide me, even knowing what I am." His answer came without hesitation. "You knocked on my door. I let you in. That does not change now. For the first time, her eyes softened. She did not smile, but a small light flickered their hope, fragile and uncertain. The guard's footsteps grew closer, then paused outside. A fist pounded against the wood of the door. "Open up," a voice called sharply. "We are searching for someone." The human glanced at the widow. She pulled the blanket tighter, her body pressed against the wall, her heart racing loud enough that she feared they would hear it. The man stepped to the door, his hand hovering above the latch. He breathed once, steadying himself. Then, with calm he did not fully feel, he opened it. The storm's cold air swept inside as the guards stood there, their faces hard, their eyes scanning every corner. "Have you seen her?" one demanded. "The alien woman. She cannot be far." The human's face remained still, his voice even. "I have seen no one." The guards studied him, their suspicion sharp. For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then, with a grunt, they turned and walked on, their boots crunching away into the snow. When the door closed again, the widow let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her knees almost gave way, and she caught the edge of the table to steady herself. The man returned to the fire, as though nothing had happened. She stared at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and confusion. "You risked everything. Why?" He did not look at her directly, only at the fire. "Because you are not alone. Not anymore." Her heart tightened at his words. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt a thread of trust forming thin, fragile but real, and though the storm outside had ended, she knew a greater storm was only beginning. Asterisk snow still covered the colony like a heavy blanket, but life behind the walls was already returning to its cold order. The guards had left his door, yet the human knew their suspicion would not fade so quickly. He could still feel their eyes on his small house, even when they were nowhere in sight. Inside, the alien widow moved restlessly. She stood near the fire, her hands clasped tightly, her face pale. Though she had been saved for one night, fear still lived in every breath she took. She could not forget the sound of the guards at the door, nor the way the human had spoken for her. It felt like safety, yet also danger. He watched her quietly, noticing how she listened to the air as if waiting for something. "They will keep searching," he said softly. She nodded. "Yes, they believe I carry a curse, but it is not a curse." Her voice lowered. "It is something far greater." He waited for her to continue, but she turned away, unwilling to share more. Instead, she gazed at the window, her reflection faint against the glass. The storm outside had passed, but her eyes seemed to see another storm, one still gathering. That night, as the human stepped outside to gather wood, he noticed something unusual in the sky. Tiny shapes moved against the clouds, glimmers of metal. Catching the pale light, they hovered for only a moment, then drifted away with a faint hum. Not birds, not snow, but machines, drones. He returned quickly, his face tense. "There are watchers in the sky," he told her. Her body stiffened. "Then it has already begun." She whispered. "What has begun?" he asked. She turned toward him, her markings faintly glowing under her skin again. "They do not only fear me, they are preparing to take me, and if they succeed, the colony will not survive what follows." Her words hung in the air like ice. The human wanted to question her, to demand answers, but the look in her eyes stopped him. It was not fear he saw there, but certainty, as though she already knew the future. In the days that followed, the colony grew restless. Rumors spread quickly, whispers moving from house to house. The widow was seen, some said. "She is hiding somewhere." Others claimed they had seen lights in the sky, or heard strange voices carried on the wind. The leaders spoke openly of danger, warning the people to stay alert. The human noticed neighbors passing by his house more often, their eyes lingering too long on his door. Inside, the widow rarely slept. She would wake often, her body tense, her lips moving in quiet words he could not understand. Once, in the middle of the night, he heard her whisper, "They are close." The human began to feel the weight of his choice. By opening his door, he had welcomed more than a freezing stranger. He had invited a secret that could shake the colony itself. And yet, as he watched her sitting by the fire, her hands folded in her lap, he felt no regret. One evening, as the last light faded from the frozen sky. Heavy knocks shook his door again. This time it was not guards, but the colony leader himself. Standing with several others, his face was stern, his coat thick with fur, his eyes sharp as steel. "We know she is here," the leader said without greeting. "Do not lie again. The widow carries danger within her, and the colony will not be safe while she hides." The human's heart pounded, but he kept his face calm. "You cast her out to die. Now you demand her again. Why?" The leader's jaw tightened. "Because she carries something that does not belong to her kind, something powerful. If she stays hidden, she puts us all at risk. Hand her over." Inside the house, the widow pressed against the wall, her breath shallow. She could hear every word. Her secret, the one she had carried in silence for so long, was no longer safe. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had known this moment would come, but then the human spoke, his voice steady, though his chest felt tight. "She is under my roof." She knocked, and I let her in. "I will not hand her over." Gasps rose from the people standing behind the leader. The leader's eyes narrowed. For a long, heavy moment, no one moved. Then the leader said coldly, "You choose her over your own kind. You will regret this." With a sharp turn, he walked away, the others following. The door closed once more, and silence filled the room. The widow stepped forward slowly, her eyes shining with both fear and something else, something close to awe. "You stood against them," she whispered. He looked at her, his face calm, though his heart still raced. "Because what they fear does not look like danger to me." Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. For the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of her burden lift, if only slightly. Someone had chosen to stand with her, yet deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The drones in the sky, the whispers in her blood, the fear in the colony's eyes all pointed to something greater, and she wondered if the human truly understood what he had placed himself against. The fire crackled softly, its warmth filling the small home, but outside, the cold world stirred with unease. Something unseen was moving closer with every passing night. The morning light touched the small cabin softly, but inside the air was heavy with silence. The girl sat near the window, her pale hands pressed against the glass as if she wanted to escape, but couldn't. Her eyes were restless, full of something she wasn't ready to say. The human noticed her distance. She had been safe for days now, yet she still looked as if she was standing outside in that frozen night, waiting for the end. He tried to bring her comfort with small things, warm food, simple words, gestures of kindness. Sometimes she smiled faintly, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. She was carrying a weight, one heavier than the cold she had endured. He didn't ask at first. He thought time would heal her silence, but every night he would hear her footsteps in the cabin, walking as if searching for something she had lost, whispering words in a language he didn't know. Finally, one evening, he spoke gently. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever it is, you don't have to keep it inside." She turned to him sharply, almost startled. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to argue, but then her eyes softened. She sat down across from him, her voice quiet. "I was left to die not because of the cold. The cold was only the cover. There are people, beings, who wanted me gone." Her words made the human freeze. She wasn't speaking of a simple accident or abandonment. Something larger, darker, was hidden in her story. "Why?" he asked carefully. She lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "Because of what I carry, because of who I am." She pulled back her sleeve, and for the first time, a faint glow appeared on her skin, patterns like stars across her arm, pulsing gently in the dim light. The human stared, breath caught. She wasn't just a survivor. She was something extraordinary, something others had wanted erased. The silence between them grew thick, filled with questions and unspoken fears, and in that silence, both of them realized the truth. Her story had only begun, and the frozen night was just the first step into something far greater. The storm outside had grown quiet, but inside the small cabin, silence felt even heavier. The fire burned low, its light casting long shadows on the wooden walls. She sat close to the warmth, her alien eyes reflecting the flames, though her mind was far away. For the first time since he had found her in the frozen night, she felt something that frightened her more than the cold safety. Safety was dangerous because it made her want to stay. The human moved quietly, adding more wood to the fire, careful not to disturb her. He didn't ask questions, though his eyes often carried them. Why was she left to die? Who wanted her gone? And most of all, why did she trust him, even a little? But instead of pressing, he simply said, "You'll need strength for tomorrow." His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, knowing that tomorrow might not be so simple. She wanted to tell him the truth, but her words stayed trapped in her chest. The truth would pull him into her world, a world of hunters and silent watchers in the dark. Yet, each passing moment made her realize he was already part of it. The human had chosen her life over his peace. He had whispered "come" when no one else would have. The night deepened. She closed her eyes, but sleep brought no rest, only visions of cold figures waiting in the snow, searching for her trail. She woke with a sharp breath, and there he was, sitting near the door, awake, keeping watch. For a moment, she wondered if he knew that by protecting her, he had already stepped onto a path where there was no turning back. Tomorrow, the snow would carry new footprints. Tomorrow, the danger would come closer. And tomorrow, she would no longer be able to keep her secret from him.